The Dental Download podcast is your source for insight from conversations with fellow dentists, specialists, and leaders in the industry. With new episodes every Monday morning, I'm your host, Dr. Haley. Let's get into this week's episode. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Dental Download podcast. I'm so happy that you're tuning in because this is something I feel like is extremely highly requested. Everyone wants the tea. They want to know what's going on with finances as a new dentist. What are people not telling you? What's true? What's false? Are you really, really digging yourself a deep hole by going to dental school with how expensive it is? People want to know what it's like on the other side, if we're surviving, if we're barely getting by, if we're thriving. And I'm going to get into all of that as much as I can with the perspective of someone that has just started working. So we're going to talk about all things finances as a new dentist. And this is part one because this is an ongoing process. You know, I'm always going to be adjusting my budget, and my financial goals will be ever evolving, and I'll be making more progress towards my current goals. So we're going to do check-ins almost every single month, I would say, of how life is going as a dentist, but I'll also include a little financial check-in at each of those episodes as well. But this is going to give you a good baseline to follow along in the future of personally where my financial goals are and what my situation is like as an associate general dentist here in the lovely state of Michigan, which is in the Midwest of the United States, depending on where you're listening from. But our typical intro, we're still going to do it because I love to give you guys the life updates, the recommendation of the week, what's motivating me, and something I learned. Those are our four big things we hit on every solo episode, but we're going to keep it short and sweet because we have a lot to talk about. So life update, I've kind of been hinting at it, but we just finished another month of work. Now that it's officially August, I started work in mid-June. So it's about a month and a half of being a real working dentist. The weekends have been really fun. We've had a mix of going back to our hometown, being me and my fiance, as well as having family and friends come to visit us. And we've also had some different events going on, or we've been traveling. And we've also had some weekends where it's just us here and we can enjoy the place where we live and explore some of the different events going on around town for the summer. My recommendation of the week is sourdough. I recently started my sourdough journey. I got a dehydrated starter from a neighbor and was able to revitalize that and use that as my starter. And so far, I've been able to make one lovely loaf of bread, but I'm excited. Now we're kind of cruising now that we have a good active starter. I can make all kinds of things, and it's fun. You can also make things with the discard of the starter too. If you don't know what I'm talking about, look into it. It's really cool. I'm working towards eating more clean and whole and natural. So making your own bread products with literally just starter, flour, water, and maybe a little bit of salt. So natural and so much better for you. And sourdough, because it has the natural fermentation going on, it does have some like pre and probiotics for you as well. So look into sourdough if you haven't, because it's a very, very fun hobby. It's semi time consuming, but really not that much. Like the time you're actively doing things about it is just like a few minutes a day. It's no big deal, but it kind of gives me something to put time and attention to and commitment to, which I think is always good. Maybe if you have children and other things going on, you have plenty of that already. But as a person that is engaged with no pets and no kids, it's fun to have something to take care of. So my motivator this week, I'm excited looking ahead to the future, especially like this topic of this episode, just a lot of future planning of my life with Justin. And on the topic of money, it's very motivating seeing income come in finally after being in school for over 20 years. It's so cool to see my savings account keep growing. I use a high yield savings account through a bank that allows you to make buckets with specific dollar amounts and deadlines of dates for each of those buckets. So for example, I have house down payment, I have things for the wedding, I have a car down payment, I have an emergency fund, I have different procedures that I might want, or different things I'm trying to buy, whatever it may be, like a puppy, for example. So saving up towards all those different goals and slowly like dispersing your money each time you deposit into the different buckets. It's really fun to watch them grow and get closer and closer to their goal each week. One thing I learned this week would be more of a personal reminder and kind of a mindset for myself. It's to push yourself clinically, just like you need to do in anything in life, but always be learning and always be growing. It's easy to focus on improving something you're interested in learning about. Like if you really want to learn implants, it's cool to just watch a bunch of surgeries all day. But we have to be working to improve the elements of dentistry that maybe we're not so excited about. Maybe because they make us nervous or because we just don't find them all that enjoyable to do. But in my opinion, at this initial stage of just starting our careers, it's really important to be focusing on getting as good as possible at the bread and butter dentistry, whether you like all those elements of dentistry or not. Later on is the time to niche down and making sure that you have those hard skills down when it comes to the very classic dentist clinical procedures, I believe is very important, and putting the time into improving those before you get too caught up in all the other cool things that you can do in dentistry. All right, let's jump into the main topic of this week's episode. So I have a mix of answering questions from you all from Instagram that I've addressed in these different categories, and also just created the categories based on frequently asked questions, kind of topics that I knew people would be interested in. So we're going to talk about the first paycheck. We're going to talk about bills and monthly expenses. I'm going to answer the question, do you make enough money as an associate? Me personally, and then just kind of generally talk about that topic of associate compensation and how it works and how it's different in different areas of the country and different practice models. We're also going to talk about spending categories and percentages. We'll talk about the specific percentages from my own budget spreadsheet and how much is going into each category for my ideal budget. Again, as a 20-something that is engaged, living with her partner in the Midwest. Do I have a financial planner? Do I work with an accountant? We're also going to talk about some of my big upcoming financial goals, and that will kind of tie into nicely like the savings and other things we'll talk about earlier in the episode. And then lastly, we'll finish about student debt and repaying school. So let's circle back to the beginning. When we got that first paycheck, that was about 1 week after working, because my work pays us every 2 weeks with a direct deposit system. So that takes the bulk, hopefully all of the taxes out of my income in advance, and then I get my net income into my account that I have set up. So I got my first paycheck and it was so nice. And it's funny, I didn't go out and buy anything because I had already been depleting my savings away when we moved here in May before I started work in June. When we were paying for my move out here was thousands of dollars, and then trying to finish furnishing the place to a way that I really liked how it looked and everything was expensive. So thousands of dollars were gone. So I was just so excited to get that paycheck and start building my savings back up and working towards the saving goals that we'll talk at the end of the episode about. But I literally celebrated with that first paycheck by opening a high yield savings account. So that was the first thing I did when I got my first paycheck as a working person. Next up is bills and monthly expenses. So dentists, like anyone else, are going to have normal expenses of rent and utilities and gas and groceries. But we also have different insurances that we have to pay for that maybe not everyone else does. So life insurance, a lot of people get that, but also dentists usually take out a pretty hefty life insurance policy as they progress through their careers, because we are high income earners, and therefore you can qualify for a quite large policy. And if you're ever going to open a practice, you're pretty much required to have a fairly large life insurance policy to sort of cover that loan amount so that the bank would approve you in the first place. So very likely that you'll have a large life insurance policy at some point in your career. I do not pay for that yet. I'm planning to start pretty close to our wedding, like a few months before. So that's not going to be until 2025 for me. But I currently and recently just started paying for my own health insurance. Some corporate offices will offer health insurance policies, how that would get deducted from your gross pay before it hits your bank account. But I don't have that option at my office. Most from my understanding, private offices don't offer health insurance. And that's also because technically hourly of clinical hours, I'm 35 hours. So I'm less than full time instead of being 40 hours. So I think that's another reason that they don't have to offer health insurance or just don't. But all those things combined, it's pretty common for private offices. You have to pay for your own health insurance. Mine is just under $400 a month for not even like a very nice policy, but it keeps me covered in case of any emergencies. But pretty much anything that I end up needing to do over the next year before I'm married will be mostly paying out of pocket on top of paying for that health insurance, just in case there's a tragic multi-hundreds of $1,000s medical expense. That's more so what I'm covering myself for, but it's expensive. And then the next insurance is your disability insurance. And for females, it's a lot higher than males. So if you're a man listening, congrats to you. And then obviously the younger you are when you take out the policy, the less it will be. My policy started right when I turned 26, pretty much. I was approaching my 26th birthday. So I had a rate for that. And then mostly being a healthy female, it comes in around over $200 a month for my location and my age and my health status. And then malpractice is the other insurance that dentists will talk about, or it's also called professional liability insurance, since malpractice is kind of a scary word. But either way, often your employer is going to pay for that. And in my case, they do. And they also give a bunch of big discounts your first year or two. So even if you did have to pay for that out of pocket, it would be very, very low. But yeah, so we have a bunch of insurances that we pay for that the average person may not. But that's all part of being a dentist and getting a fairly nice size check every month, considering the fact that we just start our professional lives. However, we did go into debt for this and we're very highly trained to understand, but it is kind of cool to enter into your profession at such a high level of being a doctor and being a leader, and not like working your way up from a typical corporate structure, like being an intern and then maybe being an associate in this department and then being a manager and then being a senior manager and then whatever, like the structure that I see my parents and my sister that are in just normal corporate America kind of work through over years. It's cool to just enter and just be dentist. Like you are the doctor, you are the dentist, and obviously your pay is going to fluctuate throughout your career depending what you're up to, but it's just very cool to be entering into a career as a high income earner, and I definitely have a lot of gratitude for that and the profession that we're in. Whether budgeting for a post-graduation move or planning your first practice, smart purchasing decisions are a must. That goes for dental equipment too. You've heard me talk about how ADEC equipment is in 85% of dental schools in North America. That means most of us already practiced on it in SimLab. If you can endure decades of students, you know it's reliable. And with ADEC's Smart Start, it costs less too. Smart Start is a savings program to support first-time practice owners with up to 25% off retail pricing for ADEC equipment, furniture, and clinical purchases for 2 years, plus a 25% clinic discount in years 3 and 4. It also includes additional complimentary services. You can learn more about it at the link in my bio, because opening your first practice is a big decision, but saving 25% is an easy one. So that leads us nicely into the question of, do you make enough money as an associate? I put enough in quotes in this question in my notes because obviously that is relative to every single person. What is enough? Are you just paying for yourself? Are you paying for a partner and a family? Are you paying for your family, like supporting older relatives or something? Do you live in an area that's very high cost? Do you live in an area that's low cost? Do you have a ton of debt that you're paying down on top of school, but maybe you have other types of debt too, like credit cards or cars or houses, whatever it may be? So everyone's enough is going to be different, but I'm probably coming to you at a fairly typical generic type pathway of going from undergrad into dental school into working without really any breaks, without having yet been married or having yet had any children. So I would imagine that a handful of you are going to travel down a semi-similar pathway. So as for how much money you make as an associate, it's going to extremely vary depending on, again, the structure that you're working in and the area of the country that you're working in. A lot of places, there is a lot less demand for dentists because there's too many dentists. So there's too much supply. Therefore, you are less valued and you will have less patients and you will make less money. And that's just how it is, depending if you're really picky about where you want to live, and you'll have that trade-off of you're not going to make as much money, but maybe you love where you live. But also usually those places have higher cost of living because so many people live there. So that's something to think about. And that's a part of the reason why I live in a more rural area and I'm doing the whole rural dentistry thing, because I think that makes totally much, much, much more financial sense. But it also, again, works for my personal and family life, and it might not work for you, which I understand. So that's a trade-off. You will make a lot less, like potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars less if you live in a very saturated place. And that's just how it is. You have to be prepared for that. And then the way you get paid matters a lot. And it doesn't matter so much really if you're in private office or a corporate office. It really just matters how busy you are and how you get paid. So how busy you are is going to either be a very high production schedule. So maybe you only see 6 patients a day, but they're each getting 2 crowns, 3 crowns, root canals, implants, cosmetics, things that are going to be thousands of dollars per appointment. So that would be high production kind of structure. Or you're going to see high volume is the other way that you can earn a living. So you might be doing multiple columns at a time, just be doing a ton of fillings all day, maybe a crown here and there, but that's like the way to get to your dollar amount of a production goal. I've heard, this is just anecdotally through the grapevine, through Facebook groups, through doctors I've talked to, a seasoned, experienced dentist. I don't mean 30 years from now, but maybe a few years from now, once you're at pace of where you should be and have a full schedule, should be producing $6,000 to $7,000 a day. So do with that number what you will. How much a dentist could make then is going to depend on the percentage in their contract. But obviously, as a new grad, I'm not doing that every day. There have been days that I have produced that much, but there's also been days where I only produced $500 because I didn't really have any patients on my schedule. So it totally depends. Overall, I'm not out producing my minimum quite yet. I'm still just being paid every 2 weeks my minimum pay in my contract, because I think on average those few days where I had very, very low production have not netted out to above my overall minimum pay, even though there have been days where I was well above my minimum. So for me right now, I'm not quite at that point yet. That's definitely a financial goal that I have, is to start earning more than my minimum pay. And I don't have too many concerns about whether or not that's going to happen. Obviously, it worries me a little bit because in my specific contract, I'm only guaranteed the minimum pay for 3 months. And then after that, and just getting paid purely on, and this is my contract, is a percent of adjusted collections. We'll talk about that in a second. But I currently am contracted for 3 months with a minimum amount of money, which is still a very fair daily rate, I would say, industry standard for a little bit more rural of an area. And if I outproduced it during those 3 months, I would get the higher amount, obviously. So that's how everything's working for me. And I explained to you how you're going to be making money, whether it's high production or high volume. And that's up to you if you want to just be super busy, bouncing between a ton of rooms, doing multiple procedures at the same time, or if you want to find an office that's a little bit more high production based, which I would say that's more how mine is. They try to schedule higher production procedures, get more done at once, get like all of the patient's treatment done at once instead of just doing one quadrant at a time over multiple visits. And then the way you be not making enough is if you're just not busy. If you're not doing high volume or high production and you're just not busy, If the dollars aren't there and you're not earning the dollars for the office, most likely at some point, whatever terms in your contract are going to kind of expire, and then you just won't be making money that you're probably happy with, unfortunately. Ideal is that you're going to be paid on a percentage of production, because you as an associate really have no say in how the office is or is not collecting, or how much they are getting claims denied or adjusting things off or offering discounts. However, I agreed to be paid on adjusted collections because I knew my office has a very high collections rate. So on to the next topic of spending categories and percentages. So let's talk about savings first. So I have my payroll system set up where my monthly spending budget is put into my checking account, and then whatever is left over goes into that high yield savings bank account. And right now, that's the same amount of dollars each month into the checking and into the savings. But again, as I reach that goal of outproducing my minimum, I'm going to have a not set income every month. It might be a few $1,000s more, it might be a ton of $1,000s more, or it might be only $100 more, or it might be the exact amount, whatever. It's going to vary a lot. So it's easier to set it up as X dollars every month go into my checking account, which in my case is $3,000. And then anything extra is going to go into my high yield savings account, which hopefully, again, is eventually going to be a lot more money, and I'll be saving a lot more than I currently am. And just keep my expenses the same is the goal as I start to earn more. Thankfully, and snaps, claps all around, I haven't had to dip into my savings at all yet since starting working. And I would say I'm saving around 43% of my net income each month. And we'll talk about what all that money is being saved for towards the end of the episode about my big financial goals. I'm pretty much spending the exact same as I did in dental school, but a little bit higher in rent. It's about $300 more a month. And then those extra insurances are several $100s when you add them all up together. So those are pretty killer, to be honest, but you can't do anything about it. Such is life as a dentist. So my spending is not dramatically more than being a student, which we all know. We've heard that classic advice: continue to live like a student for 3, 4, 5 years as much as you can to try to save up a lot of cash for either a business opportunity, such as buying a practice or a partnership, or if you want to aggressively pay down debt instead, whatever your personal choice is in your specific situation, I'm sure. But either way, spending as little of your income as possible, therefore you can save or pay down debt, is of course the most financially responsible thing to do. We all know it, but do we all do it? That's another thing. And that leads us into this point. You'll hear more about it later, but my partner and I, are teetering on the decision of not really following that advice so well, and maybe getting ourselves a mortgage and buying a home, which would be obviously not the most financially responsible thing, but I'm just being honest with you about where we are at, because it would still be responsible enough. It would be below 30% of our total household income, which is the standard thing they tell you across the internet. And then you'll still have X amount for spending, X amount for savings, and you'll be fine, in quotes, people would say. So obviously it would be okay. It's not the most ideal financial decision, but it wouldn't also be cripplingly stupid to do. But it would dramatically decrease the amount of money that I could save each month, because it would increase our housing costs very significantly. Right now, we have a very low rent payment split between the two of us. So sacrificing that is not the smartest thing, but it really is just being honest with you all about life post-grad, especially getting our life started and starting to grow into kind of having a family one day and everything, and just rather getting equity in a home that we can then use when we're moving again and sell, instead of just having a bunch of cash in a bank account with renting. I don't know. I just would really like to have our own place soon enough. Maybe not as soon as I would like. He's kind of trying to convince me to hold off for another year at least. But it's a really tricky thing of trying to balance enjoying life and enjoying the fruits of your labor while still trying to be financially conscious. So it's up to every single person to determine just how frugal do you want to be. That's really a decision that everyone needs to make for themselves, and something that we are actively working through as a couple. So I don't have a definitive answer, but those are kind of some of the figures that we're using to make sure that we're not going way outside of our means. And I'm also using my current income, not my income that I will assume that I will have even by the end of this calendar year based on the scheduling at the office and the production and all that, because I don't want to overestimate how much money we will be making and then have something that we can't afford. Again, when deciding like how much of a house could we afford. But that's also going to be up to the banks and what they would approve us for a loan, of course. So next we're going to talk about the percentages in my spending. And I know this is getting to be a long episode, but I hope you are strapped in. I hope you're enjoying your commute or your workout or your cleaning, whatever you're doing, or you've got something nice to enjoy while you're listening here. But we're going to talk about the percentages from my personal budget sheet. And people also are always curious, am I working with a financial planner? Do I work with an accountant or anything for advising my finances? And this is a good preface when going into this category about budgeting and budgeting percentages. Currently, no, I do not. I'm meeting with a CFP, so Certified Financial Planner, in the fall, come October, I believe I set up that appointment. And I purposely waited until I'd be several months into working. That way I could see if and when I really hope I start out producing my minimum, how much am I going to talk about that? It's not that I'm not making enough. It's just obviously I would like to keep saving even more money so that we can be closer to those big financial goals that I'll talk about later. Obviously, everyone would like to save more money and not have debt and have a house that they like and have a car that gets them to and from. Like, everyone wants these things in life, just to different scales and degrees. So obviously I'd like to be earning a bit more than I am right now. So I figured I would wait to meet with the CFP until my income was a little bit more stabilized, my schedule at work was a little more stabilized, and I knew what my actual income was. Then we can work together to reframe any budgeting, get more advice about retirement and all those sorts of things. So I'm doing that in October, and then I'm just going to be using my parents' accountant for 2024 taxes. And then next year I'll probably switch to my boss's accountant that they use because she's a lot more familiar with dental. But at the moment, basically just using any accountant. You could even use TurboTax. I just have a little bit more things to do because of income from social media, podcast, YouTube, and stuff. So I'd rather have someone else do it for me, if I'm being honest. But that's all to preface. These are just percentages and dollar amounts of how much my stuff is and how much I'm comfortable with. So I'm sharing it to be transparent, but I also think you need to set this for yourself with, if you have other stakeholders, if you will, in the decision-making process of setting your own budget and coming up with what makes sense for you. But I know people are curious and maybe they want to know what's realistic and what isn't. I don't know if I'm going to share the exact dollar amount that I make, but you could probably infer from my expenses and things if you really cared that much. So I have a set income, as I said, that is currently my minimum pay from my contract because I'm not out producing it yet. So that's what I have to work with, plus tiny, tiny, tiny pennies from social media that I get sometimes. And those are pre-tax as well. So I need to save for taxes whenever I get income from social media and podcasting. But the dentist income is already taxed. So my expenses category, I have rent that is $1,000. I have groceries, gas, miscellaneous expenses, food and drink out. So that's like if I get coffee or if we go out to dinner. I have a category for any fun activities, shopping that I might do that month. I have a category for household items that we might buy, so maybe cleaning supplies, something of that nature. I have a category for gifts. I really love giving gifts to my friends and family
for their birthdays or different holidays. So I set a fairly large budget for that. And if I don't spend it one month because there's no one to celebrate, then that just leaves more for the next month. I also have a category for car maintenance, for travel, for health expenses, for charity, and then for any expenses for our wedding that we're responsible for. And all of that comes out to around $3,200 a month estimated what I think my expenses will come out to. And that is not including my bills, insurances, subscriptions, which I have obviously Wi-Fi, water, electric, and gas. And then I also have a gym subscription. I have my phone bill. I have car insurance, disability insurance, health insurance, vision insurance, and a few streaming type subscriptions like Apple iCloud. I pay for Disney Plus, and I pay for a Spotify, and then everything else I pretty much share with my different family members, pay for different things. We kind of support each other in that. I'm sure a lot of you have similar experiences there. And then eventually I will have professional memberships, but right now that's $0 because they give you kind of the first year free as a member of your state dental association, the ADA, AGD, those things you don't have to pay right away, but next year I will. So bills and subscriptions comes out to $892-ish. So altogether, it's about $4,000. But then I also have a car payment that's like $450. So let's say $4,500 a month generously. I don't really spend that much. As I told you that I only give myself $3,000 a month and I haven't had to pull into my savings. And that is because I don't have all of the miscellaneous expenses, all the food and drink out, all the shopping and fun. That's a lot of money that I don't spend, but I put it in the budget just in case. That way, if I go, I'd never go over it. If I go over my budget, I get very sad. So I kind of over budget to make myself feel better because I have the ability to do so. But more so realistically, the important thing to know is that I recommend only putting the amount of money that you're comfortable spending into the account that you spend from, because then when you look and think about how much you can spend, that's the amount that you have, and you won't spend more than that because you don't have it. So that's what I do with my checking account. And then as for savings every month, as I said, everything that's left goes into my high yield savings account, where I'm saving for some big financial goals that I can talk to you all about later. Percentage wise is though, how all this breaks down. Essentially, I'm saving about half of my income. Like I said, right now it's only 43. And then my car payment is about 5.5%. My bills and subscriptions is about 12-13%. And then expenses is everything else. So 40-ish% of my income. So that's how all of that works out and shakes out. All right, we have just 2 topics left. I hope you're still with me. We're going to talk about my big financial goals that are upcoming and plans for repaying school. So big financial goals, what are those buckets in my savings account all about, and when are these big expenses happening? The first timely big expense that I'm saving very aggressively for is to buy a car. I'm currently leasing a car through a program that I no longer qualify for with my age. So that expires at the end of this calendar year, and I've decided to purchase a car instead of entering into a new lease. So I'm saving for a large down payment and then financing the rest of the car. But I want to have enough cash for a down payment that I'm happy with and maybe get a better interest rate. And then my other main savings is an emergency fund. Of course, that's like the first thing you want to fund as you're saving. I personally like to do 3 months of expenses in there. And as you can imagine, I'm not quite fully funded for a car and an emergency fund yet, but we're getting there because we are saving a lot every month. As I hinted at earlier, we want to buy a house eventually. We're even looking into building a house, which you need even more liquidity to get approved for, apparently, because I just don't feel like buying something we don't really like and then renovating it and spending all that money. I would rather just get something that we like, and it would be super fun to build from the beginning. But we'll see if we end up doing that. We're in the very, very, very early stages, as I mentioned, of seeing what is possible for us, what we'd even qualify for, and then seeing when we'd want to do it, if it's anytime soon or if it will be a year or multiple years from now. And lastly, I said our wedding is another big financial goal that's coming up in October 2025. We're very lucky to not be paying for a large portion of it. However, there are still thousands and thousands of dollars that we are responsible for paying on our own, and also thousands and thousands of dollars for a honeymoon that we are also paying for. That will definitely be the most luxurious, expensive vacation I have ever taken, but there's no time like a honeymoon to do something like that. So we're excited to be saving for all of those things, but they're large. They're very large expenses, and other than paying for school, which again doesn't even kind of feel like real money in a way because you never had the money to begin with, it's just crazy to fathom getting so many dollars in a savings account and then just spending them on things like a honeymoon or a car or a house down payment. And again, not even the whole house, just a down payment. It's all quite wild to me, the adulting and growing up and finances, but that's where we're at. And then repaying school. I'm not going to go into my specific situation just because it's very non-traditional and really won't be helpful for people, but I believe everyone has a 6-month leeway period until repayments start after graduation. So I also am not going to be starting payments until 2025. But my main thing and what advice I have heard from student loan professionals is just figure out the plan that you want, make it a firm plan that's best for you, and stick to it. Their main advice is that you don't want to waste money doing really, really aggressive payments for a few years and then switch to the minimum repayment plan. And then you've just wasted all this money that you could have been investing instead of putting into a debt payment that you're not actually planning to pay down ever. Likewise, it wouldn't be good to start with only the minimum payments and then switch into aggressively paying it off many years later because you've already been accruing so much interest that you could have otherwise avoided by starting paying aggressively at first. There's pros and cons to both, but you really want to consult with a professional, figure out your plan, and then do it as soon as possible after school, right from the beginning, rather than trying to switch around different types of plans. So consult the professional is my best advice. I know many people that like to use Student Loan Planner as the company. I really think it seems like it would be the best couple $100 to get a personalized payment plan, consultation, and plan made with them. It's not sponsored, but maybe someday. I really think they're the ones to reach out to if you have questions about paying back your dental school. So that's all for this. I want to remind you that there will be future episodes. If this is something that you're interested, feel free to send me any questions that you might have for the future, because finances are, of course, an ongoing part of life forever. It's going to be forever evolving. We're always going to have new progress towards those big goals, new goals that come up. And I didn't get into so many other important aspects of finances, like what it's going to be like working with a financial planner if we decide to, saving for retirement, investing, updating budget, trying not to have a lifestyle inflation. These are all topics we'll discuss in the future as they come. But I hope you all enjoyed this episode so far. I know it was very long, but I hope it was informative. So be sure to let me know what you think by reaching out on Instagram, leaving a comment, leaving a like for this week's post. It's at Dental Download Podcast on Instagram. And I will talk to you all next Monday.